Hello everyone, welcome to the today's webinar. Myself Akila, I'm from the marketing team. We are pleased to have Ravi sir, Director of Market Consulting at the Business Research Company. In the today's session, Ravi sir will discuss about the dementia and Alzheimer's diagnostics market and focusing on key trends, market developments, and opportunities shaping this. With that, I will hand it over to you, Ravi sir. Please continue.
Thanks much, Akila, for the introduction. So today we'll be discussing on latest trends in dementia and Alzheimer's diagnostics. So why is it important regarding Alzheimer's and dementia diagnostics? So because of high disease burden, in 2025, it is estimated that over 65 million people aged 65 plus years have dementia, and of them, at least 70% of the dementia cases are related to Alzheimer's. And this disease burden, these numbers are expected to triple by 2050, reaching to around 150 million. And dementia is a seventh leading cause of death worldwide, and financially it costs around 1% of global GDP. And the most very important thing is, though we have high numbers of patient population, for example, more than 60 million in 2025, 75% of those cases are still undiagnosed across the globe. In developed countries such as US and UK, the undiagnosed rate will be 20% to 30%. But in countries like India, China, and other emerging countries, the undiagnosed rate will be as high as 75 to 80%. So though patient population is very huge in millions, the target people or target population having the disease are not diagnosed, because most of the patients are asymptomatic until they get severe symptoms at the final stages. So it is a good or great opportunity for the companies who are involved in the development of diagnostics for these neurodegenerative diseases. So with this background of high prevalence of dementia and Alzheimer's, let's move to understand what are the various types of tests that are currently carried out to detect these dementia and Alzheimer's. There are four types of tests that are currently used. One is cognitive assessments. It is a first level of assessment by a neurophysician or a physician. Tests such as cognitive assessment tests and neurological exams were conducted at the first level of care or in the memory clinics. The second tests are imaging techniques like CT scan, MRI, PET. These are considered as gold standard techniques, which can detect exactly the presence or absence of these dementia and Alzheimer's, and also the severity of the disease. Genetic testing is a very emerging type of testing, which is used where in cases of familial occurrence, when there is a family history or when it is familial occurrence. And this is to test the risk. It is not to test whether there is a presence of disease or absence of disease. These are mostly used to understand if a patient or if a person is susceptible to these Alzheimer's or dementia at a very early stages, unsymptomatic stage. And finally, the most important is biomarkers, which is our interest in today's discussion. So biomarkers, there are two types of biomarkers testing. One is cerebrospinal fluid biomarkers and second one is blood biomarkers. So cerebrospinal fluid biomarkers have been existing and over a decade. It is one of the traditional testing method for dementia and Alzheimer's. So it is based on evaluating these biomarkers within the cerebrospinal fluid. So it is taken from through lumbar puncture, which is a bit invasive procedure. And these biomarkers are nothing but proteins which are generally elevated or even declined in the diseases compared to normal individual. So the final category of biomarkers are blood biomarkers. These are very novel diagnostic techniques which companies have been developing in past few years. And only in 2025, two of the blood-based biomarker tests have been approved by the FDA and EU. So, in summary, cognitive assessments, brain imaging techniques, CSF biomarkers are traditional techniques used in dementia and Alzheimer's diagnosis, whereas blood biomarkers are a very novel, latest diagnostic method which have been developed to detect the presence of dementia or Alzheimer's disease or even the severity or progression of the disease through blood. So now that we understood the four types of or major three types of uh, tests, now we'll try to do a comparative analysis of these diagnostic techniques in terms of key testing parameters such as invasiveness, cost, scalability, and diagnostic stage. So cognitive testing and imaging are low invasive techniques. Blood-based biomarker also a minimal invasive techniques to drawing the blood, whereas CSF method is a high invasive method through lumbar puncture. When we compare the cost across these four diagnostic tests, it ranges from $50 per test for normal cognitive testing to around $3,000 for PET or CT scans. And whereas blood-based biomarkers will be around $200 per test, though it is introduced recently, and maybe in the next 5 or 6 years, cost per blood-based biomarker test will be reduced rapidly if it is adopted at a mass scale. In terms of scalability, yes, cognitive testing is scalable, whereas CSF and imaging are not scalable. It is very specialized tests, whereas blood-based biomarker can be scalable to any amount or any volume of the test. In terms of diagnostic stage, cognitive testing can be performed only if a patient has late-stage disease symptoms, whereas CSF, imaging, and blood-based biomarkers can be detected even at the early stages, even though the patient do not have any symptoms. So, in summary, the three traditional tests, cognitive, CSF, and imaging methods, involve trade-offs across cost, invasiveness, and scalability, whereas blood-based biomarkers emerge as a disruptive solution, combining low invasiveness, affordability, and high scalability, which can be adopted for mass-scale screening at very early stages. So as we are focusing on blood-based biomarkers because of their advantages, let's understand what are the various types of biomarkers which are usually detected in these neurodegenerative diseases. So the main types are A and T. They are called A and T, amyloid and tau. These are proteins which are elevated in the patient having these dementia or Alzheimer's. And when the disease is in a severe stage where it leads to degeneration of neurons, then the other biomarkers, neurodegeneration biomarkers, can also be detected, along with neuroinflammation markers, which are uh, uh, being developed now. So the major biomarkers, whether using imaging techniques or using cerebrospinal fluid or from the blood, the major biomarkers which are tested in the patients are amyloid, tau. These are the two major things, followed by neurodegeneration markers. So, in terms of biological timeline of Alzheimer's progression, not that each the biomarkers on the progression of the disease. You cannot detect biomarkers at a very early stage. For example, amyloid is a protein which is a biomarker which can be detected in a very early pre-symptomatic stage. Whereas tau can only be detected when there are symptoms, when there is disease severity. Whereas the neurodegenerative biomarkers such as NFL and GFAP are detected only when there is some amount of cognitive decline and when the Alzheimer's is in a very severe stage. So the summary biomarkers evolve as disease advances. You can detect amyloid at initial stages of the disease. You can detect tau protein when the disease is in a progresses, and you can detect NFL and GFAP in a very severe condition or when there is some amount of cognitive decline. Okay, so uh, you cannot use amyloid testing for a patient which has already got symptoms. You have to use tau testing, phosphorylated tau test, because amyloid accumulates at the start, even during pre-symptomatic stages. Amyloid is a protein which accumulates in the brain, and tau is a protein which accumulated in the neurons when neurons get to start degenerating. Okay, so the strategy here that companies are employing is not only one biomarker testing, but using multiplex testing, testing several biomarkers at a time, testing amyloid beta plus phosphorylated tau plus NFL at once, so that a physician can know, or we can know, the exact presence as well as quantification or severity of the disease. So with all the summary of the various types of testing methods which have been evolved over a decade. So if you see how is this testing uh, techniques shifting or evolving, in the old model, PET, MRI, those two are imaging techniques, along with evaluating biomarkers from CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. So this combination is called gold standard. Even today, these are used as a reference gold standard to exactly detect these proteins, to understand the severity of this Alzheimer's or dementia. And the current trend is use of blood biomarkers and coupled with digital cognitive tests, because blood biomarker testing is a simple method of testing using the blood, faster analysis, less invasive, more scalable, and can detect even pre-symptomatic patients. Whereas in future, it is estimated, or in future, the trend could be use of artificial intelligence plus use of these continuous monitoring by some type of blood biomarkers. So the old model is mostly a specialist type of model, where a specialist neurophysician will prescribe PET or MRI imaging coupled with CSF testing, and it is tested using at a very advanced facilities which have those specialized imaging modalities. Whereas new model using blood-based biomarkers can be employed at a primary care center by any physician, by any technician. Cost will be lower, speed will be high, can be detected even earlier pre-symptomatic stage. And so these are the changes in the model of testing which governments or companies have been trying to implement. So with this background of biology of Alzheimer's disease and testing, what types of methods are used, what are the advantages? Now let's understand what is it importance to the market, because we are everything we'll try to understand from the market perspective. So blood-based biomarkers have advantages, so what? So in terms of market, the total Alzheimer's and or dementia testing is estimated around 11 billion in 2025. When we say 11 billion, it includes all types of testing, imaging modalities testing, CSF biomarkers, blood-based biomarkers. And the total diagnostic testing is estimated to reach around 30 billion by 2035, with around 10% growth rate. In terms of blood-based testing, because only in 2025 there are approvals, FDA and EU approvals for the two blood-based biomarkers test. In the overall Alzheimer's and dementia diagnostic testing, blood-based biomarker testing is only around 150 million of the 10 billion. 10 to 11 billion, it's only 150 million. But it is estimated, or it is projected for a rapid growth to reach around 2 billion in by 2035. The reasons for this rapid growth compared to the overall growth of the disease testing, blood-based biomarkers is expected to grow around 20%, whereas overall diagnostics is growing around 10%. This is estimated to at least grow at a 20% rate. The main reasons are FDA approvals. There could be, after a couple of years, payers could be interested because this is low cost. The payers can reimburse for these blood-based biomarker tests. And by 2030, These tests can be used along with companion diagnostics to develop drugs. For example, now there are monoclonal antibodies which are used like anti-amyloid antibodies. So those type of biologics or antibodies could be developed along with these testings. And finally, because of the multi-marker panels, like not only using only one protein like amyloid or phosphorylated tau, there could be multiple biomarkers. A multiplex panel could be developed where a single drop of blood could be tested against a multiplex panel to understand exactly which proteins are varying to the normal. So because of these factors, the blood-based biomarker testing is estimated to grow uh, around 20%, reaching around 2 billion by 2035. The one point here to note is though there is a high growth of blood-based biomarker tests, the growth is in terms of volume and the cost per test could decrease. And because the imaging modalities such as PET, MRI, CT scans are costlier tests, in 2035 also, overall the ratio of those other traditional tests will be more compared to the blood-based test. However, the growth will be much more significant in these blood-based biomarker tests. So we are saying in the previous slide that the total market is only around 10 to 11 billion as of 2025. But try to understand the total addressable market. Every person above 60 to 65 years of age is eligible to be tested for Alzheimer's or dementia. So when we take the overall population globally, all the 60 65 plus aging population, the total addressable market for this dementia Alzheimer's testing will be at least 130 billion. So where is 10 billion? Where is 130 billion? So very high market opportunity for the companies who develop these low cost scalable testing solutions. And of the 130 billion, around 30 to 35 billion are serviceable markets. The markets such as US, Europe, Japan, which have infrastructure for testing and which are open for reimbursement and which are even drafting policies for reimbursement for these types of tests. Of course, the serviceable market as of 2025 is only 10 billion because of these challenges with respect to testing and challenges with respect to reimbursement and lack of awareness. However, in next 5 to 10 years, Alzheimer's diagnostics or dementia diagnostics is a 200 billion plus market opportunity. So to understand the proportion of the type of the test within all the four tests, of course, imaging modalities will have a high proportion of 45 to 50%, followed by biomarkers, including both CSF and blood, constituting around 30%. Cognitive tests or first level of tests, primary care level, around 20%. And genetic testing is very niche because it identifies only risk population but does not confirm the presence or severity of the disease. Let's try to understand the market in terms of regions. US definitely 40% of the market with double-digit growth rate, followed by Europe with 30% of the market. Middle East around 10% of the market. The most important point is APAC region, though 20% of the global market as of 2025. China and India are expected to grow. The diagnostics for these neurodegenerative diseases in China and India are expected to grow around 20% because of huge target population and aging population. Japan and some of the countries in the APAC region have started, the population started to age, or we have huge uh, uh, aging population, target population for testing these diseases. So from the market, let's move on to trends. So across each of these different testing methods, there are latest trends. For example, digital assessments, using of wearables, mobile apps, and VR cognitive tests are available for cognitive assessments. Advances in imaging techniques, advanced MRI techniques. There are many types of MRI are being developed. Advanced magnetic resonance spectroscopy techniques. Companies are developing spectroscopy-based biomarker detection, even nuclear medicine techniques, and use of AI in across these techniques. And finally, biomarkers utilization, panel tests, and use of these uh, neurofilament and GFAP biomarkers. So as of now, from decade, research is more on amyloid and phosphorylated tau proteins. But now, from past few years, there is heightened research in terms of other biomarkers such as NFL and GFAP, which can be used for detecting neuron degeneration, not only for this dementia and Alzheimer's, but other neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's and others. So let's move to last section, understanding the competitive landscape. So what are companies doing in terms of these Alzheimer's and dementia diagnostics? So when we segregate companies into four quadrants with technology, innovation, scale on the y-axis, and scalability on the x-axis, we have on the top right side quadrant the major leaders players such as Roche, Future Bio, Siemens, Eli Lilly. Those companies are leaders having high innovations and testing solutions. They already have installed base of blood analyzers across the laboratories, and they can use their blood biomarkers. Uh, they have a high install base, and that can be scalable. Those testing solutions can be scalable. The other top left quadrant are uh, the companies which have high innovations with respect to these testings, but they are not scalable. C2N Diagnostics, it's a spectroscopy based testing solutions. Though it is very niche, have more sensitivity, but it's not scalable. And then we have other companies, emerging players in the lower quadrant, and we do have laboratory diagnostic entities such as LabCorp Diagnostic. Those also are developing in-house CLIA waived testing solutions. Those are not very innovative, but those testing solutions can be scalable, and those are partnering with other companies for developing these tests. So let's see what major companies, what are the strategies in terms of these diagnostics market. For example, Roche already have an approval in 2025 uh, for blood-based biomarker tests using amyloid as well as phospho-tau. It has a good advantage of leveraging large installed base of their analyzers across the laboratories, and has a good physician trust and credibility. Fugir Bio and Sysmex, this is the first company. It is the first company to get a first to market FDA clearance for multiplex testing. So, whereas Roche is how to test either one biomarker, either amyloid or phospho-tau, but this Fugir Bio have developed a multiplex test where it can detect both amyloid and phospho-tau. This is a unique first in market, and it has a very good advantage, and it is building integrated CSF and blood-based ecosystem. C2N Diagnostics, its core technology is mass spectroscopy, whereas other companies are developing immunoassays, whereas this company is trying to, or it has already developed a testing solution using mass spectroscopy. Quantarex is one company, it's a very unique uh, technology where it can test 5 biomarkers through one testing panel. So it is testing phospho-tau, amyloid beta 40, 42, GFAP, NFL. So what the important 5 biomarkers which are elevated or which vary in a diseased patient can be tested through one test. So it is a very good test as per the experts. It is near to commercialization. So the players have different strategies to penetrate into these diagnostics market. If you see the approximate market shares as of now, Roche is a player with more than 20% of the share. Eli Lilly, though, do not have blood biomarker tests. It has partnered with Roche to develop companion diagnostics, and it do have tests related to imaging reagents. And there are other companies, as I mentioned, Quantarix, Future Bio, Siemens, and many other emerging players as well are trying to develop testing solutions for these diseases. So it's again a summary of what are approved. Roche, Future Bio, C2, and Diagnostics. All these companies do have approved commercial tests. And important point is all tests are approved only in 2025. Before we have only in 2024 we have only CSF tests or imaging modalities, but blood-based biomarker tests are only approved in 2025 and available in the market in the late 2025 in the US, Europe, and now starting to be available or starting to use in the APAC regions. So next are other types of companies which are using other latest technologies. For example, some companies like Illumina and others are using next generation sequencing platforms to detect these tests. They have Alzheimer's and dementia, next generation sequencing panels. There are companies such as 23andMe, LabCorp, which do genetic testing. Of course, this genetic testing is only a prognosis or to understand the risk of the disease, not the severity of the disease. Some companies even developing CRISPR-Cas technology for detecting. Of course, most of these are in the pipeline stage, not yet commercialized. So finally, what are the key market takeaways? What strategies do the companies who are developing these biomarker tests should employ to penetrate into these diagnostics market? One, blood test definitely unlocking scale because of the recent FDA clearances and shift from the specialist imaging modalities to a broader primary care blood-based biomarker testing. So there is a market inflection point. Second, MRI and imaging modalities are high cost tests. And these blood-based biomarkers or biomarker tests are low-cost tests, which can be used to detect the same type of, while the imaging modalities are gold standard, these biomarker tests are also have the same types of specificity and sensitivity parameters. Next, integrated ecosystem players. So companies combining validated biomarkers, digital platforms, AI-driven interpretation of the biomarker. So market is shifting from radiology hardware models to biomarker-based lab platforms and multiplex monitoring model. As we have seen a company which has developed with 5 biomarkers. So there is a heightened interest in developing multiplexing analytes. So what TBRC can do what TBRC can provide services to the companies who are in the diagnostic value chain. These are some of the example modules, like we can help understand epidemiology or patient population insights, try to understand the current penetration of the biomarker test in various geographies, help understand the reimbursement status of these biomarker tests. It is understood that even in the US now, it is in the initial drafting stages with related to reimbursement of this blood-based biomarker test, and around $130 are being reimbursed, but it is still in the draft stages. So we can help understand the reimbursement landscape and what are the thought process of payers with respect to the reimbursement of these type of tests, to understand the competitors, benchmarking of competitors, and their strategies. And finally, go-to-market strategy, developing a road plan of which geographies to enter, what should be the pricing point for these blood-based biomarker tests, what should be the promotional strategy. So those are some of the consulting services that we generally provide for the companies who are developing these types of unique tests. So that's it from my side. Ready to take any questions you have on this topic.
Does anyone have any questions? Please feel free to ask, or you can also drop a comment in the chat box regarding the question.
So if no one has any questions, then thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ravi sir, for those valuable insights. And thank you everyone who joined us for this session. Before we wrap up, we also have an upcoming session on 30th of April focus on competitive intelligence for strategy managers and strategy leaders. Please keep an eye out for the invite. We look forward to having join us. Thank you everyone and have a great day. Thank you, Ravi sir.
Thank you all.